Guys, have a seat. And
Sir,
yeah. Hi, good evening, everyone, and welcome back from the CLAT paper. I have been hearing very disparate reactions about the paper. As usual, a whole bunch of surprises. As usual, various challenges and changes from the established pattern or from what was supposed to be predictable. So let's make a start. Let's have a discussion. Overall, lots of you are telling us that the paper was somewhat hard. It was slightly long. But I think the main challenges which everyone saw was the absence of critical reasoning, right? So the entire logical reasoning section mostly comprised of various passages of analytical reasoning, puzzles, relationships, arrangements, and questions like that. And there weren't really any direct questions on critical reasoning. Okay, so what we'll do is let's just get a broad idea. Let's go section by section and have a look at what happened and how we should view the standard and difficulty of this paper. Okay, so let's first start with the maths section. So in the maths section, we had, as expected, two passages with 12 questions in total, 6 questions each. One of the passages focused on sources of energy, and the other passage focused on insured versus uninsured people in rural and urban areas. Okay, so the questions were pretty standard. The calculations and the working out was a little bit long. It would have taken some amount of time, but all of the questions focused on percentages, ratios, fractions, averages, as we had predicted. Okay, so that way the math section was kind of expected, though a tad bit long. Okay, but the types of questions were basically as expected. Okay, next let's come a little bit to the GK section, and ma'am is also here with us. So we had 5 passages in the GK section spanning 28 questions. Okay, now almost all of the passages were expected, important, prominent things from the year. There was a notable absence of some important, prominent topics like UNESCO and things like that. But in any case, 4 out of 5 of the topics were heavily in the news and were prominent. And one topic was a big piece of news, though not entirely an expected question. That's the Air India crash. Okay, so what are the passages we had? Ma'am, would you like to discuss it a little bit?
all right. Now looking at the paper and the GK section, we received a lot of mixed reactions, but mostly the children were happy with at least 4 questions, telling us that the GK section was fairly fine. And a lot of questions were doable, and I was pretty happy with this. And looking at the first section, which was on the Trump tariffs, which was an anticipated question, and also because a lot of things happened in this entire year with respect to India-US, and a very recent current affair also took place in November itself, and then it was a big piece of news. The questions asked were fairly easy. The initially imposed tariff rates, and then what was the vision of America. So it was a fairly well covered topic in the classes also. So I feel that this was fairly fine. Then FIDE was important this year because we've been hosting it this year. Also, we got a new chess champion from India under the FIDE Cup, and the trophy was named after Vishwanath Anand. So given these events that happened this very year, this was an expected and a probable question in sports this year. Then coming to the next one.
Right, the next one, of course, was the prominent issue of the Pahalgam attack and the linked topics relating to the Indus Waters Treaty. Okay, so this again was a very expected topic. This also asked a question on SARC, which of these is not a SARC nation. Okay, it asked a Latin, the meaning of a Latin phrase, that is persona non grata. Finally, the last two questions focused on the Indus Waters Treaty. Okay, so till now, these three topics reasonably well anticipated. All of the stuff about Trump, about MAGA, about tariffs, about the H-1B visas. Number two, about chess, the chess cup, the first Indian to be a grandmaster, where chess originated, and so on and so forth. There was a little bit of an AI angle in the chess question as well, which AI actually defeated Garry Kasparov. So that was the slight AI angle there. Pahalgam, fairly straightforward. The clear most direct question topic which was expected, SCO, right? You all know in the last few years, we've had at least one question on one or the other international summit. So till now, we've had G20, we've had BRICS, and so on and so forth. This year, of course, the focus on the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and its summit, which happened in Tianjin.
All right. Now, the last passage, which a lot of us did not expect because we did not think that it was as important that they'll ask a full-fledged question on this. But nonetheless, it was covered through legal sections, and otherwise one or two questions in the ALET exam was also asked on the same. But okay, 90% of the paper was covered through us. We do always expect surprises. So this was one of the surprising elements in GK. One of the questions I hope that you all got correct. Sir was very adamant on teaching you all the respective ministers. So one question must be correct this time.
All right. Anyway, so not a ridiculous topic to ask in the exam, but certainly this Air India crash question asked very, very granular questions, right? The rest of the passages asked expected things. This passage 5 basically covered stuff like which airport was the flight going to, who is the Minister of Civil Aviation, where is the Memorial Welfare Trust to be established, who was the sole survivor was not asked, but what is the nationality of the sole survivor, somewhat absurd, which agency is probing the crash, and what kind of plane was this Air India crash plane. Okay, so in terms of GK, 80% expected, 20% somewhat unexpected and granular, but otherwise on the whole, not a very difficult GK section.
Yes.
The presence of the Air India crash question made it slightly difficult.
Surprising.
Slightly surprising.
And also very, very saddening that we did not get UNESCO and Ramsar this time. Much anticipated.
All right. Let's now come to the logic section. This was, this posed considerable problems to a lot of you. And basically, there were about 24 questions. There were 4 passages, and none of them were clearly from the critical reasoning section. Okay, so the first passage was basically about rearrangement of the letters of a word, and that word was electrocardiograph. So what it did was asked you to rearrange the words, put some letters in a different position, put an S at the end, and then it asked you questions about what is the resultant word that you have gotten to. Okay, so we will certainly call this analytical reasoning, I guess. Then we had one passage which was sort of a detective novel. So what it did was said that something is being displayed in a museum, and then it listed 3 suspects and said what are the various factual circumstances related to each of them.
And then interesting one though.
It was interesting. It was probably the most fun question in the entire paper. But what it did is ask questions like the most likely suspect, what is the least time possible where this robbery could have taken place, what is the value of certain pieces of evidence, and what are the possible logical flaws. Okay, then the third passage focused on familial relationships. Okay, the third passage focused on familial relationships and basically talked about symbols as relationships, right? So a multiplication sign meant father of, a division sign meant mother of, a plus sign meant brother of, and a plus sign meant daughter of, and a negative sign meant brother of. So that was the key to the code given in the passage. And then all of the questions basically sought to have you answer the relationships between various people. So a sample would be P plus Q minus R divided by T. If this is true, how is T related to P? Okay, so essentially interpretation of the symbols and familial relationships. There was also at least one question in this set which is possibly incorrect. We'll of course come to it when we do our detailed discussion in about half an hour to 45 minutes. Okay, and finally we had the fourth passage, which was essentially a puzzle kind of an arrangement question. So there were 4 teams, red, blue, green, yellow, and there are 4 rounds to be organized between 2 teams each. Then 5 rules were given on how these matches are to be arranged. And then, of course, you had to answer a whole bunch of questions on that. Okay, so the reasoning section, unexpected, slightly tough and long, also had at least one incorrect question, which either should get cancelled or everyone should get a mark. Okay, so let's see about that. But overall, a long section, unexpected, a change over the previous practice over the last 5 or 6 years. In that, almost no critical reasoning questions were asked. Okay, at best we can say 1 out of 4 was critical reasoning. That is the detective's question, right? That is the question about the theft mystery. Okay, so that is about the logic section. We've also looked at the GK section. We've had a look at the math section. Let's now come to the English section. Now, this is something I think you would have all done well at, right? Classic pattern, 24 questions, almost nothing unexpected, exactly the kinds of passages you have all trained on, right? There was one passage from Bipin Chandra, India's struggle for independence.
Yes, and I'm very happy about this, that I kept on bugging you people to please read Bipin Chandra for history. At least it made it to the English section this time.
Okay, so ma'am was very happy. It's of course a classic of Indian history. So a passage on Bipin Chandra about the non-cooperation movement. Okay, and I'm assuming having a background knowledge about this would have helped you. And ma'am has of course covered specific classes about the non-cooperation movement as well.
I had told you all that one passage is expected from history every year, and a passage from history was in the paper. It came in the English section, that is something else. But my taught passage in history is there in the paper, although in the English section.
All right. So it had classic questions. Usually the split in each passage was about 3 or 4 questions which were about understanding and about 1 to 2 questions about terminology. Right. So in this passage, the meaning of communalism was also asked. Then the second passage was Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. So this is a classic book from a few years back, a brief history of mankind. Okay, here too, classic reading comprehension. In this one, there were no vocabulary questions. Next, we had a slightly complicated work, somewhat not unexpected, because Surbhi ma'am always gives philosophical passage to you all to prepare you for these kinds of passages. So this passage was The Origins of Political Order from Francis Fukuyama. Okay, so it basically asked you questions about the trend of democratization and the recession of democratic structure over the last 20-25 years. Okay, so this again was largely based on the passage without too many vocabulary questions. The second last passage was one by Rabindranath Tagore. The book is called The Hungry Stones, or the story is called The Hungry Stones. Now this passage, relatively simple, but 3 out of 5 or 2 out of 5 questions were vocabulary, asking the meanings of theosophist and boorish, and one question was about a figure of speech. Okay. Finally, the last passage was from George Orwell's Animal Farm. Okay. I think if any of you have spent time in our library, you would have found, I am not sure, I think almost every book which came in the exam is present in our library. Okay. So the last passage is a classic from George Orwell's Animal Farm. And once again, one question asked the literary technique, one question asked the tone, one question asked a meaning, and one question was comprehension oriented. Okay, so that covers the 4 sections. Till now, I would say English was the most directly expected section. Practically in line with the past practice, in line with how you would have prepared. Maths at the next level, though slightly longer. Logical, decent, but there was no critical reasoning or almost no critical reasoning, but it was full of analytical reasoning. GK, entirely expected. The only slightly less relevant topic perhaps was the Air India crash. Finally, we come to the legal reasoning question. Once again, there were some issues with this section. I don't think any of you who have studied for the exam would have found it very difficult, but this year marked a return to the asking of legal knowledge questions in the legal section. Meaning, the answers to these legal knowledge questions were not derivable from the passage. In fact, some of these questions, basically, they could have put in the GK section. Okay. And these questions, the legal GK questions, we would not have covered in the legal class, but we have certainly covered it in the GK class. Okay. So if you did, if you studied for GK properly, especially with us, you would have certainly been very well prepared for the legal GK that came in the exam. Okay. But this is certainly a departure from the past practice of the past few years. So let's have a quick look at the passages and let's get into it. So the 2 passages which had a lot of legal GK. One was about one nation, one election. Rather, this passage was almost entirely about all the one nation, one dash type of programs. One nation, one election, one ration card, one subscription, and so on and so forth. Okay. Here, there were what? 1, 2, 3, 4 out of 6 questions were legal knowledge, right? One about the Constitution Amendment Bill number of the One Nation, One Election Bill, the chair of the high level committee on One Nation, One Election, a different committee which had recommended it, and the new GST rates. Okay. All these 4 questions were basically GK questions, and the remaining 2 were more like passage based answers rather than even legal reason, right? It was more like English or logic question, the questions on the underlying idea and the object. Okay. Then the second passage we had here, which again had quite a bunch of legal knowledge questions, was on the preamble. So it was simply an extract from B. Shiva Rao's The Framing of India's Constitution. Here too, 1, 2, 2, 3. 3 out of 6 questions were based on the passage, and 3 out of 6 questions were legal knowledge. Remember, I had recently told you, you have to know the order of sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic from the preamble. Okay, preamble is that one of those parts of the Constitution which should basically be by heart. Ma'am has also covered it in class multiple times.
And something that Vasu sir is very, very fond of.
Of course. All right. So once again, this passage had 3 passage-based questions and 3 legal knowledge questions. Now, this is the point till which the legal knowledge questions came. The remaining passages basically were legal reasoning, as you would expect. What were these 3 passages? One was a general article on whether PMs and CMs should appoint ministers who have been charged with offenses relating to moral turpitude. Okay. Interestingly, this set of 6 questions did not require too much analysis and implementation of reasoning, but were almost exactly from the passage. Okay, in the sense that it was more like critical reasoning or English rather than legal reasoning. Okay, by and large from the passage itself. The fourth and the fifth were classically legal reasoning passages. Passage 4, very, very expected standard passage on the Tamil Nadu assent to bills judgment given by the Supreme Court, discussed any number of times, both in legal reasoning as well as GK. I think we even gave one in the sample paper 1 or sample paper 2, which we had.
And in, I think, 2-3 mocks also, this entire thing has been asked in GK as well.
Okay, so I think if you had a good basic idea, passage or not, you would have been able to answer this question very well. But in any case, this was a slightly long one, 6 questions, long questions. Okay, so Tamil Nadu governor's case. Final passage was basically to do with family law and specifically same-sex marriage. Remember when we had all done family law in class, I would always begin with discussing how in India marriage is only permitted as of now for heterosexual couples. So this passage was about same-sex marriage and the judgment of the Supreme Court last year in Supriyo alias Supriya Chakravarti versus Union of India. And this was again a passage which was 6 questions. 5 out of 6 were legal reasoning, and 1 question asked the full form of LGBTQIA+. And that too not the entire thing, but the full form of I and A in LGBTQIA. Okay, so that's the background. So just to go through it, a quick recap. The legal section, the unexpected things. So let's flag the good things and the bad things. Good things about the legal section, not ridiculously long. Passages were not absurd, no crazy areas of law. The bad things, for some people, bad things, about 7 or 8 or 9 legal knowledge questions. Other than that, it was a mix of legal reasoning and critical reasoning. Next, logical reasoning, full of problems because it was a departure from the past pattern, and almost no critical reasoning. 3 out of 4 passages were directly analytical. 1 possibly could be said to be critical reasoning, basically a puzzle. Maths, nothing bad as such, just must have taken a little bit of time to solve it. Slightly long, but as expected, 2 passages, 12 questions, standard interpretation or standard techniques to be implemented. Standard techniques to be implemented, percentages, ratios, averages, so not a problem at all. English section, absolutely straightforward, 5 passages from standard types of topics, mix of fiction and non-fiction, so quite good there. Classic, few vocabulary, figure of speech, tone questions, rest from the passage. Finally, we have the GK section. I would say you would have done well. Air India crash question was a little bit unexpected, but other than that, all the other 4 passages were classic. America, Trump tariffs, H1B, chess, Pahalgaon, Shanghai Cooperation Organization. That I think is a good summary of it's a good summary of the paper. The purpose of this video is just to have a quick look, a first look, and just to see what you all are expecting. We haven't, of course, had the answer key yet, but I would say just looking at the questions, at least 1 question in logical reasoning appears to be incorrect or not capable of being answered. Okay, so that's basically our first impressions, ma'am.
I think it was a pretty fine paper, and if you had done GK well, so you got a GK question in English also, you had 2 GK questions in legal also. So I feel that mostly the paper was based on GK only, be it any other section. And I feel that the paper might range from an above average to a medium difficult paper. All right, it was a fairly good paper, and this time we feel that the discrepancies in answers would be less as compared to the last year. So this year you will fairly get a straight answer key, and you all can calculate your scores pretty early, and you'll get your results also in 1 week's time.
Right. Yeah, I think that way this year the paper was not riddled with too many errors. I could see a few grammatical mistakes in the questions, but that was about it. And at best, as of now, one question seems to be wrong. We'll of course give you the detailed breakup in the next video that we do.
Also, I feel that those of you who had run away from reading the entire year, who did not read the newspapers, did not build up their reading speed, I think they would be at an advantage in this paper. GK was not reading based, and legal was also mostly very less passage based. It was only in English that you had to focus a little more on the reading thing. So that way, this was an advantageous paper for those people who did not build up the reading speed. Okay, so that was one thing which was different this year. They broke away the pattern for the past 2-3 years that they had built up, at least in the GK section, that they were giving you answers from the passage. This year, no answer was from the passage. Okay, so that was one thing with the paper, I think, that
Absolutely.
they did deviate from. And otherwise, a fairly good paper. I'm very happy with the paper. I'm very happy with the GK section. I'm also happy with one English passage, and I'm also happy with 2 legal questions. So it is a good GK based paper.
So a little everyone had prepared for 5 sections, but as ma'am said, a lot of emphasis on basically being generally well aware, and that being pretty useful in answering this paper. I can see a bunch of our students are reacting to what we are saying. Would any of you like to chime in? You can unmute and chime in if you want.
Hi.
Yes, Om.
Hello. Hi. First of all, I would like to say we love you all. Thank you. We love you all. Thank you for the preparation.
Yes, yes, we know. Please get rank number 1 this year.
Paper was very good. The paper was a little surprising, but really good. And I feel CLAT Possible is the best.
Good.
Oh.
Good. I want your impression also.
Have you a little extra Vacu, sir? You need extra.
Extra what?
He loves you a little extra Vacu, sir.
We love you a little extra Vacu, sir.
How sweet. Okay, do you guys have any specific criticisms or any things you'll want to mention about the paper?
Sir, Modi ji ne paper class diya. To be on a serious note, analytical, the critical reasoning part was a little surprising, but I feel it was fair. It was a fine and a fair paper, and I feel that since it was a tougher paper, that means the cutoff will probably be fluctuating according to that. So all in all, it was a good paper.
That's fair, because the thing is, it seemed like the English section was straightforward, maths a little bit lengthy, legal broadly straightforward except the legal GK part.
Yeah.
GK relatively straightforward except Air India crash. Logical not so straightforward because the pattern was different, though most of you are also giving ALET, so you would at least have been decently prepared. It was nothing crazy even so far as analytical reasoning is concerned. It'll be interesting to see which section becomes the tipping point this year. Yes. In the sense that which sections have most people done decently at, and therefore which section becomes the tipping point in terms of putting people across the finish line. So let's see. Stay tuned. What we'll do is we're just readying up our question by question detailed analysis, which we are planning to begin maximum in half an hour. So we look forward to seeing you all and interacting with you all further. That's all for this video, ma'am.
Anybody else wants to give their first impressions of the paper?
From
Chandigarh Center also, all those who joined us. You all can please unmute yourselves.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, from Chandigarh. Whom do we have?
Yes, sir. Just a second, ma'am. Just a second.
Yes, Shreya, what was your impression of the paper?
Sir, it was easy.
It was easy.
Yes, sir.
It's always music to our ears when a student says they found the paper easy.
Sir,
That's
in the
nice to
logical
hear.
section, all the questions were of AR.
Yeah, that was the unexpected bit, right?
सर आई लेफ्ट वन पैसेज ऑफ यार वो लास्ट वाला जो पैसेज था ना वो छूट गया बिकॉज टाइम की बहुत कमी लग रही थी बाकी
Sorry, who is speaking?
उत्तम
Hi.
हेलो यस सर वो लास्ट वाला जो पैसेज था वो छूट गया
Which one? See, the order was different in all the papers, so you'll have to tell us in AR.
ग्रीन टीम्स वाला
Okay. The ABCD
Yes,
rounds and red, blue, yellow teams.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, sir.
All right. Okay. So the paper was slightly long. I've come across many students who have ended up missing one or the other passage. So that's not entirely unexpected. But it's good to know that by and large, most of you found the paper easy, predictable, doable.
Yes, sir.
Right? So congratulations on getting done with it, getting done with this first paper. Hopefully you get the result before ALET even, and then you can just relax till you're bored. But if not, maybe take a break for a day and then we get back to work for the next exams. Okay. All right. So stay tuned for the next video where we are going to do a detailed analysis. We'll go question by question. So we'll start that in another 20 minutes. All right. Best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.